Evening, everyone. Welcome to England Football Learning live webinar. Tonight, we're going to be looking at how to observe and manage difference. We are going to try and discuss and share some information around firstly, the importance of knowing your players. Knowing your players, knowing their individual needs and capabilities. That's both from a football and technical perspective, but also we look at a full corner perspective. What are we like in the social and psychological and physical corners, and what else do we know about our players that helps make them tick? Secondly, we're going to look at the importance of step and the step principle. So if you're aware of step, brilliant. We'll have an opportunity to discover a little bit more. If it's something that's new to you, we'll introduce you to it and talk you through how useful it can be and support you as a coach working in the game. And the last one we'll look at is between us, there's some practices that we will share with you. We'll discuss, we'll talk through that will allow and support you to observe and manage difference within your coaching session. So that last bit will be a chat around some practices we've had a go at designing.
Yeah, I think it's important that we check in with the players, both physically, because we see it anyway, but the mental side and the social side of the game. So just moving forward, we're going to talk a lot around about the passing core skill, because it is a core skill for April. If you're familiar with these webinars, every month we have a core skill that we look at, and this month it's passing. These figures were taken last year at the FA DNA Cup, and you had foundation girls and youth development girls from RTCs, and then the same but from academy boys. They were invited down to take part in different formats. So it ranged from 3v3s to 11v11s, so that we could try and better understand what opportunities players had in those formats, which took into consideration having more players, the space of the pitch, timing on the ball for individual players, and how they performed the in and out of possession tasks. And it's probably no surprise for the 3v3s that there was a lot more passing that took place. There's a lot more opportunities for that to happen. And as we go up the formats, the bigger the pitch, the more players to try and get on the ball. So it was interesting in terms of the 3v3 at the under 14 girls, which was 23 compared to the rest of the age groups.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the detail in there, which is talking about passing actions in the game, when we start talking shortly around practice session designs, I think the benefits of small-sided games just shout out absolutely there, doesn't it? So when you're looking at the number of opportunities linked to our 6 capabilities, so the opportunity for individual players to scan or position themselves, to actually execute a pass or receive a pass, and then obviously maybe look to move the ball on with a 1-2 combination, a wall pass, etc. So I think the benefits of small-sided games should be front and center of our practice sessions. And again, I'm talking about this whether you're working with those 8-year-olds or those teenagers or those adult players.
And I'll probably go back to my skills coach days a few years ago. We were really good, and I saw a lot of practices of the 3v3 formats, the 5v5s, and then we kind of went through this transition in this country where there was this big headline of let the game be the teacher, realism to what the game looks like, and suddenly coaches feel like that actually every time they put players into a game, it has to replicate what they play at the weekend. So if it's 9v9, if it's 7v7, they wouldn't necessarily play the 3v3s because they'd think that it wasn't relevant to the game. Well, actually, it's massively relevant to the game. If we're talking about players getting more touches, more opportunities. We're all coaches here, and we all know that our session starts at 7 o'clock, but we can't get on the Astro until 7. So is that a little arrival activity where you say to your players, look, 3v3s, go and set up your own pitch, allow them to play around with the space and the size of that 3v3 pitch. That allows them that practice of them 3v3s, whilst it gives you that time to kind of manage and set up the session ahead. When we're looking, especially in the youth development phase and the foundation phase, you'll see a lot of growth spurts, and that will have an impact on what your players can and can't do. So you might have a player especially the movement and technique. So especially over that side of the capabilities, they're relearning and retraining their body if they've gone for a growth spurt. So actually you might see that they used to be able to execute a long pass. They've gone through a growth spurt over the summer. They've come back to you pre-season, and all of a sudden they can't pass that ball no more. It's over that long distance, because you have to take into the considerations of them trying to retrain their brain in terms of what their growth spurt that they've just gone through. And for me, and I've deliberately left it last, is scanning. And I think it's one of the capabilities that as coaches we totally miss, because it's probably one of the hardest capabilities to coach. But one thing we can do, especially in the foundation phase, is constantly reinforce it. Are we checking our shoulders? And I say this to all the players, and I say it to my men's team week in, week out. Can you play in the future? Do you know what you're going to do with that ball before you get it? And if they say, no, it's impossible, check your shoulders. Take those photos. What does it look like when you check your shoulders? Because it will always buy you 1 or 2 seconds in that game.
Whatever our practice design is, and whichever of the capabilities we're really trying to bring out within the session, I think for all coaches, it's important to try and be the guide from the side rather than the sage front of stage. And if I explain what I mean by that, if we're going to observe properly, at times we need to give the players that opportunity. You mentioned earlier about the arrival activity being 3v3. Let them play, whether that's your arrival activity or a main part of your session. Give them plenty of time to play so that we can actually observe the things that we're really wanting to focus on within that session.
As well, like, it's really important, like, what this means to the players. So I have a predetermined thing that's scanning, maybe checking my shoulder as a term. But just because I haven't seen the player do it doesn't mean they aren't really good at it and highly skilled at it and doing it all the time. So it's really important, as well as us understanding this language, that the players, it's all about the players. The players are the most important. That's the reason we're all there, is to help them fall in love with the game, help them become better, help them to realise the potential they've got within them to stay in the game forever. They're going to have their own ways and versions of what these things look like. So time into one player might look slightly different to time into another because of their physical capabilities or their understanding, whatever it might be. So that's also something to bear in mind as well. Like, we can give you some headings, but the players will have their own ways of doing some of this stuff that might not be how we were taught to do it when we were younger.
So the first one was 3v3s and 11v11s from the foundation phase. For me in here, everything's about the ball moving. Ball doesn't stop. So that was the first video in terms of the 3v3, v11v11 formats in the foundation phase, and especially in the 3v3s. What I liked, especially in this format, is you constantly see the ball moving, which means that the picture's always changing, which gives lots of opportunities for scanning. It allows players to build up their confidence in that 1v1 situation. And like I said, again, I don't want to get into those debates of female v male football or girls v boys, but it gave the foundation phase in the girls, especially in the girls format, the opportunity to be confident and take on players in them 1v1 formats. And this is the foundation phase. Again, we've gone 5v5 to 7v7. Confident first touch there. Timing of the pass. In this clip, for me, I really honed in on the number 9 in the bigger format. And what was interesting about that is when I first watched it and he received the ball, he got the ball in his right foot, he took a touch back and he tried to execute that longer pass on his left foot. At first, I thought to myself, do you know what? He needed to put a little bit more on it. would I pick? And then it was only when the game went on a bit further and he had a shot on his right foot, in my head I came back to thinking, actually, left foot probably is weaker foot. Am I going to go in hard and say, well, it needs to be you need to put a little bit more on it? Or is it a case of going back to that physical development of going through that physical transition? Great, you're using your left foot. Let's keep encouraging that. Just might not be there yet because he's not used to using it, or he's not physically got to that point yet. So I particularly watched the number 9. I don't know if anybody else did, but it was just interesting that when you home in on them players, you start breaking it down in terms of the physical, the social, the psychological. And that's the great bit about the individual and their capabilities, is you start breaking it down to the 4 corners and how that looks. And them 4 corners will look completely different for every player. You'll have 11 different 4 corner models based on that individual player.
I think it's really important. We've already shone a light on the individual tactics concept. So this is all about, can we make every single individual player more confident and more competent around those 6 capabilities? And how do we do that? Well, moving away or on from the individual tactics, can we then start our players to combine in 2s? And within practice sessions, of course, that's going to look like 2v2s, 2v1s, 2v3s, etc. And so that image there just eventually takes us working from the individual tactics to working in 2s and 3s in terms of what the practice sessions, small-sided games will look like. And then obviously into larger units as we move through the formats, 7v7, 9v9, 11v11.
Like, spend time observing your players. It's really, really important. Rosie said it before. Have you got other people around you, other coaches? I think I saw one in the chat saying there's 3 coaches for 18, 19 players. Like, how do you best use your time as a 3? Is that 2 observing some players? And it's not that you have to observe every player every week for the whole time you're with them. You may work in some cycles and working with groups of players at different times. But yeah, for me, you just can't emphasize enough the importance of being able to observe that individual and then be able to try and help them get better at whatever it is you're looking at.
So what about on the ball, around the ball and away from the ball? We talk a lot about this on the coaching qualifications around what we want players to do on the ball. What are we looking for? So in this one here, we've identified the number 8 on the ball. In those moments, it's knowing what your players, again, is capable of doing. So my number 8 gets on the ball. Can they play forward? Can they look to get the 9 and 10 involved? To get the 10 involved, it might be a case of deception. They need to find that clear line of pass. Again, the scanning to find out where the other players are. How do they link to that 9 and 10? And again, it comes back to that 3v3 format when people say it isn't relevant to the game. Well, if you was to put a box around that square, there's your 3v3. So to me, it's relevant. It's a part of the game. It happens in the game, and we're just magnifying that moment in the game. Then we start looking around. So how does the players affect that number 8's decision? So for me, we start getting into those little bits of discussions around triggers. So my number 8's understanding the psychological corner of the game. If my number 9 drops to receive the ball, that's the trigger to play the 9. The number 10's trigger might be, I'm going to take myself into a position where it's not a clear line of pass, and that's the trigger that I'm then going to drop to get on the ball. So it's how does that 9 and 10 relate to your individual's capabilities and what they need? And then we look a little bit further away from the ball, and we look in terms of support in front, behind. Are we scanning? Do we know what's behind us? Also, as well, it's about making those decisions in those moments. So if that number 8 is aware of it, of his or her surroundings, and they try and play a 1v1 there, and the what ifs of losing the ball, well, we're outnumbered in the fight. We're outnumbered in the final third. So what would be the decision making there? Well, might be the number 9. It might be a disguise into the number 10. And then finally, how does that open up to the whole pitch? And again, it's about understanding your players and what their capabilities are. So you might have a player that your number 8 might be really good at distribution. So the trigger might be the 9's going to block that pass into the 7 on the diag. As soon as they move out, can that 8 play into that 7? But you might have a player that doesn't have that. So it might be a case that the player that can play that ball might be the number 4. So you might be asking your number 8, right, I need 9, you need to get on the ball for a short pass to set it to the 4 of a player that can play that ball.
And for me, adaptable arrival activities, really do shine a light on the whole concept of step. So can you have an arrival activity, and it might be me and Rosie straight away playing a 1v1 tag game, cat and mouse. Rosie is actually, we're best mates, but Rosie's quicker than me. So can you adapt it up by saying to Rosie, come on, give Vinny a chance. So if we're working around a 5x5 square, straight away, let's adapt the task. And the task is that, Rosie, down every other side, you need to skip or hop, which is going to give me a bit more of a chance if I'm the cat trying to catch you, to actually get around the area. So AAA, adaptable arrival activities, straight from the get-go at the start of your practice sessions.
So we're just going to walk through slowly a bit around the practice spectrum. So we're just going to throw up some practice ideas that sit on the spectrum and look at how step could potentially be used, what its place is in this, and how it again links to the 3 R's that have just been mentioned. So I'll put them all up and then we'll have the conversation, because I'm conscious we're also going to look at some practices in the next 5 to 10 minutes, which will bring this to life, hopefully, as a diagram. So we'll start in the top left corner as you're looking. So unopposed technique work, you'll see at the bottom, there's a white strap line across the bottom. That gives you an idea of what we feel the real emphasis would be on if you deliver this type of practice. And as we're talking for the next 5 minutes, just have a think, where do your practices currently sit that you deliver? If you were going to deliver tonight, if you're delivering tomorrow, if you're delivering on the weekend, what types of practices are you delivering with your players? So we've got the unopposed technical repetition of technique, top left. We'll go into unopposed / interference. So you'll start to see on that bottom line, linked to the 6 capabilities, some of the colours start to change. So technique still really high. Start to see some oranges in there. So we think they may start to fit in. They may start to come into action in this space. Deception, maybe not. Maybe one that comes a little bit later. We'll flip on again into the overload, underload practice. So good for learning, lots of game-based stuff. And again, you've seen the bottom strap line goes a lot of green. So we maybe start to think that when we start to get into this space, the players may be getting more benefits from it than potentially the first one. And then the last one is matched up. So again, this starts to talk around skill development. It starts to talk around good for long-term learning. Gives the players some key reference points. So as people are starting to transition through formats, you can start to include offsides, etc. And again, we've got a full sort of green group at the bottom. So link to step. Rosie, I'll come to you first. Any observations across those 4 and where step fits and links into this?
In terms of the skill, is how you execute that through the technique. So especially with the passing might be a technique, but the skill is what type of pass, how you pass it, how you execute it. Is it over a long distance? Is it short passing? Different parts of the feet. And also, as well, the most important part is knowing when to execute that certain skill or technique in the game at that given moment. A
couple of bits that have come up in the chat box. So I will talk around not knowing numbers that are going to turn up. This practice really allows you to deal with that. It's not set that you have to have 3 on one team, 4 on another, 2 on another. So it allows you to do that. It also allows how you group your players to be really flexible. This is a really simple practice of working in an area. There's a central square in place. Longer term, that central square becomes a place that the players have to play through, which is likely to become more congested, more tight. But what I don't want to do is isolate passing too much. So this should give them enough repetition while still giving the other stimulus of other players, defenders, space, timing. So it's not isolating passing to its absolute core. It's still giving some other bits that are really important to the players. but it should put quite a lot of repetition on the passing. So it should give them lots of opportunities to practice as they're in this session.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a really important point maybe for us to start to wrap up on, isn't it? Is that if we're working to a specific theme over a series of weeks, that it should be about helping our players, whatever their age and stage, to understand the game better and to develop their capabilities within the context of the game better, not to learn new practices all the time. And therefore, as you say, this one could be great for all the 6 capabilities. We could dive into that. We could fill another webinar, couldn't we, just talking about this one?
Absolutely.